I think it's 25, so you can launch the start the meeting. Can you confirm, Mafia, that we can see the PowerPoint only?
Yes.
Perfect.
And the meeting has started.
Wonderful.
Ça va derrière.
Hello, Vianney.
Ça va derrière ou pas?
En fait, il y a un noir. On te voit pas entièrement.
Donc, comment je peux faire? Si je me mets comme ça, là, c'est mieux. Attends,
Ah, par contre, il y a déjà 5-6 personnes connectées. On a ouvert la séance, hein, juste pour info.
Ok. Si je me mets comme ça, c'est mieux là?
Voilà, c'est bien. Ouais. C'est stable.
C'est bien là?
Ouais, c'est bien. Qu'est-ce que tu en penses, Mathias? Ça va?
Oui, c'est bon.
Bon. Alors, on a 11 participants déjà.
T'as pas mis ta bannière, la Saint-Yves derrière?
Non, je ne l'ai pas avec moi. On a eu une conférence lundi sur la filiation. Et je l'ai laissé là où on l'a eu. Voilà, 28. On va commencer avec... Good evening. We're not yet starting the session. We'll start in a few minutes. So if you're joining, be welcome. we're waiting for figures to go up a bit, and let's see. Let's start in 1 or 2 minutes. Good evening, everybody. Okay, I will probably start. Up. Here we are. So good evening, everybody. Dear friends of Saint-Yves, chers amis de Saint-Yves, a warm welcome from Luxembourg to this online conference on Rosario Livatino. This conference is organized by 6 Catholic law societies from Belgium, France, and Luxembourg. My name is William Simpson, and I'm a lawyer and a legal counsel, and I'm in charge of the Catholic Law Society of Luxembourg called the Conférence Saint-Yves. The event of tonight will probably last 1 hour, and I have the honor to introduce our guest speakers to the audience. So our first speaker will be Vianney Bagnot. He's a lawyer working in a French law firm and is head of the Catholic Law Society of Angers in the west of France. Then Mr. Domenico Airoma is a chief prosecutor of, Domenico Airoma. He's the chief prosecutor of Avellino in Italy. He will present the life of Rosario Livatino and his canonization trial, and his lecture will be given in English. Then Mr. Filippo Vari, he is a professor of law at the Università degli Studi Europea of Rome, and he will talk about the legal thinking of Rosario Livatino, and he will speak in English also. And finally, Mr. Claude Eischen of the European the European Delegated Prosecutor at the European Public Prosecutor's Office, which is known in French as the Parquet Européen, and he will entertain us on the purpose of anti-money laundering rules, so AML rules, and inspirational AML lawyers. So he will speak in French. So, but if some of you do not understand French, please let us know on the Q&A, and he will switch to English. So happy to, he's fine to switch to English if needed, so please let us know. Finally, we will have concluding remarks, which will be given by Olivier Pigneux. He's a compliance officer manager in a financial institution in Luxembourg and an active member of the Saint-Yves. So the event of today is going to be registered and it will be posted on YouTube. For instance, our colleagues from the Catholic Lawyer of Australia told us that it's midnight now, so they cannot follow, but I will be really happy to see what we have been discussing tonight. The event also will be written down in an article, and we will make a publication of it, which will be shared with all the Saint-Yves globally. And if you have any comments, we have the Q&A next to us, and please let us know. Thank you very much for your attention, and happy Saint-Yves to all of you. Vianney, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, William. I will then continue in French. La question à laquelle il m'a été donné de réfléchir en ce propos introductif était celle de savoir pourquoi choisir la figure du bienheureux Rosario Livatino en cette fête de la Saint-Yves. Eh bien, comme Saint-Yves, le bienheureux Livatino a répondu à sa vocation de magistrat avec toute l'intensité que réclame l'engagement chrétien. Sa place lui garantissait une vie de notable reconnue, elle lui assurait le confort, elle lui assurait la reconnaissance sociale, l'autorité, le pouvoir. Mais le bienheureux Livatino n'a pas voulu se contenter de cette position pour en jouir simplement, sans faire trop de vagues, sans contrarier les forces en présence dans le monde et ainsi éviter les ennuis. tout en accomplissant malgré tout un travail raisonnable. Non, le bienheureux Livatino a considéré que sa place, sa position l'obligeait, en homme et en chrétien, à servir la justice. Il a considéré que s'il ne s'attachait pas à ce rude métier, à cette œuvre audacieuse et risquée, aucun ne le ferait à sa place. Comme le bon intendant de l'Évangile, qui est chargé par son maître d'administrer ses biens, le bienheureux Livatino a su reconnaître que son emploi de magistrat était une intendance du royaume de Dieu pour œuvrer à la justice dans sa juridiction. Et vous savez qu'il n'avait pas une juridiction très simple puisqu'il était en Sicile. Alors il s'est mis au travail, non pas pour une gloire personnelle, mais comme un serviteur bon et fidèle de Dieu. Son intendance comportait des risques. L'œuvre de justice supposait de s'opposer à la mafia, aux petits arrangements des puissants, aux magouilles, au règne de l'argent, au crime. Le bienheureux Livatino n'a pas reculé. Sa place était là, sa foi le soutenait. Il exerce son ministère, comme il a l'habitude de le dire, sous la tutelle de Dieu. Et il signe comme ça. Le 21 septembre 1990, il est assassiné par la mafia, par ceux qui le dérangeaient. L'offrande de sa vie font de lui, selon le mot de Jean-Paul II, un martyr de la justice et indirectement de la foi. Aujourd'hui, son exemple nous interpelle, chacun d'entre nous, sur notre intendance propre, sur la charge que Dieu a confiée à chacun de nous dans le domaine de la justice et du droit, sur notre manière d'administrer cette charge, avec courage, avec foi, en chrétien. Comme Saint-Yves, la figure du bienheureux Livatino est un sillon de sainteté dans lequel chacun de nous peut s'engager pour qu'advienne le règne de Dieu.
Thank you very much, Vianney, for this introduction. Now the floor is yours, Domenico.
Thank you. Good evening. First of all, I would like to thank Mr. William Lindsay Simpson for inviting me to this important conference. Warm greetings to all the participants and happy feast of Saint-Yves to all of you. I'll try to give you just some pictures of the life of Blessed Rosario Livatino. Rosario Angelo Livatino was born in Canicattì, a little town in the very heart of Sicily, on October 3rd, 1972. He's the only son of Vincenzo, an employee of the municipal tax office, and of a teacher, Rosalia Corbo. The life of Rosario testifies in particular two aspects of the cultural, moral, and spiritual education he received. The first is represented by the strong sense of dignity, due to his awareness of being part of a 1,000-year-old tradition of thought. 101 anni, 101 years. This was the nickname his classmates gave him to emphasize the wisdom, almost singular with his young age. The second is given by the humility, the authentic one, the humility of who knows that the search for the truth asks for a never-ending effort. The same humility that leads him when he decides to approach the sacrament of confirmation, to attend a preparation course, sitting in the oratory with the other young people while he was already 30. Dignity and humility will be his moral stars even as a magistrate, first as a public prosecutor and then as judge at the criminal court of Agrigento. Dignity in the exercise of a profession that required firmness, especially in a society where it was normal for a judge to be sensitive to pressure and intimidation, where to be independent and appear as independent was something heroic. Dignity, but also humility. humility in dealing with everyone he was called to judge. Rosario felt himself linked to the accused by the common humanity. Never he felt himself as superior. He respected the liberty of the convicted person so much that he did not hesitate, for instance, to go personally to prison in Agrigento in mid-August to release a person in pre-trial detention. It is also told that in the presence of the corpse of a murdered boss, after a police officer had commented positively on the killing, he said, before that, those who believe pray, those who do not believe are silent. Rosario was appointed as a judge at the age of 26 on July 18, 1978. I took the oath, he noted in his diary. From today, therefore, I am in the judiciary. May God bless me and help me to respect the oath and to behave according to the education my parents have taught me. Words written in red ink, a clear sign of a mission that he felt like the center of his own life. Was the use of the red pen a mere coincidence? It's to be excluded. Rosario carefully kept his diaries and meditated on his writings with great attention and depth. He was never superficial. Nor can he be said to have had a graphomania. There are only two writings of a certain consistency that he left us. One dedicated to the role of the judge in a changing society, and another to the relationship between faith and law. For the rest, speak his agendas and his judicial decisions. No interviews, no press conference. The red ink cannot be therefore a case. It cannot be a case for a person who was used to think of herself as living sub tutela domini, under the protection of the law. It's a sign of the beginning of a mission that Rosario felt as his vocation, the path assigned to him by God, and that he was called to carry out. Even in contexts where Cosa Nostra knocked on parents' door, physically I mean, as the mafia boss of Canicattì lived on the upper floor of the building where the Livatino family also lived. A mission to never betray. Even though he realized the danger to his life imminent. We know, in fact, from his diaries, that he was tormented by the fear of causing a displeasure to his dearest parents. Nevertheless, he did not hesitate to deal with the most dangerous cases. Despite the danger, he never wanted the escort to avoid exposing other people to danger. His colleagues considered him a point of reference because he was always at his place from early in the morning till late in the evening, just a glass of milk for lunch. It must be also highlighted that when Rosario dealt with Cosa Nostra, lots of the most important investigative tools were not yet introduced. He was left alone against his enemies, and the martyrdom was not long in coming. It was September 21, 1990. The sky was clear. The sun was already warm when Rosario takes off his jacket and gets in his car, his old Ford Fiesta. He takes the usual road that would have led him to the court of Agrigento. What is his thoughts? Going through his diary, we note that in those days, Rosario no longer writes. We do not know the reasons for such a sudden silence. We only know that in those days, the dangers for his life had grown. Many, in fact, were the signs of an ambush against him. especially since he dealt with the proceedings aimed at seizing the assets of Cosa Nostra. Mafiosi could not stand anymore that Christian judge, the Sant'Occhio, as they called him in a derogatory way. They hated him both as a judge and as a Christian, so much that they wanted to kill him in the initial project before the church where Rosario went every morning before work. Once again, Rosario was called to make a choice: take a long period of vacation or ask for a transfer to another office, perhaps leaving his Sicily, the landscape that represented his life, his flesh. In short, stay in the place God assigned to him, or choose an exile, more comfortable, quieter. Once again, he did not back down. The Lord had called him to that mission. The Lord would have assisted him. The Lord would have given him the strength not to give up, not to surrender to those who wanted to be no justice for Sicily. We like to think that that morning Rosario, carrying those thoughts in his heart, left home, greeted his parents, and went to work, like every morning, like every day. The assassins who have confessed the abomination committed tell of a man mortally wounded who, looking them in the eye, asks, "What I have done to you, Picciotti?" A man is also judged by how he dies, not only just how he lived. His last words were not of hate. It did not appeal to his authority, to his role. His last gesture was a question. How is it possible that a man who feels that at hand, who therefore has nothing more to ask of earthly life, concern himself almost worrying if he has done a wrong that provokes a mortal hate? It's possible only if we realize what Rosario was. A man who made justice his mission until the end. Until means all his life long. In asking this question, he reveals himself once again as a righteous man, righteous also in putting his murderers before their consciences. After learning of his death from Rosario's mother, St. John Paul II was so impressed that he pronounced that memorable invective against mafiosi in the valley of the temples of Agrigento, recalling that the judgment of God would also come for them. The process of beatification began precisely due to the willing of St. John Paul II, who called Rosario a martyr of justice and directly of the faith. After a lengthy investigation, during which many of his colleagues and even one of his murderers were hired, he was beatified on May the 9th, 2021. In the process, a miracle was also ascertained. A young woman healed from cancer after she had prayed Rosario. Why the beatification? Why Rosario and not, for instance, Giovanni Falcone? Rosario was killed in odium fidei. As in him, the mobsters saw the right judge because a Christian. That's the reason. He's a martyr of faith, of that faith that led him to understand that charity is the reversal of justice. A model, ultimately, not only for the judiciary and for jurists, but also for every man engaged in institutions, for every Christian who intends to serve institution loyally without betraying his conscience. Like all the saints, his example has often been misunderstood. sometimes treated almost with mockery, especially when he was called il giudice ragazzino, the little judge. Still today, not welcomed as a model by all the magistrates in Italy. Even so, he is the way out of the moral crisis that the Italian judiciary is going through. The Battle of Rosario, which was a battle of body and soul, was in short how to combine faith and life, make life consistent with faith, make faith evident in life. His was a dramatic spirituality. His diaries tell of a soul always looking for light, that light that satisfies the thirst for infinity. His life, both as a judge and as a Christian, can be summarized in the following words we can read in his conference about faith and law. To judge means to decide. To decide is to choose. And to choose is one of the most difficult things that a man is called to do. To choose. Light is necessary, and no man is absolute light. Thank you, Blessed Rosario. Thank you also because you have showed that you can go to heaven even doing the judge. Many thanks for your attention.
Thank you very much. And now the floor is for Filippo.
Okay. So, good evening. My name is Filippo Vari. I'm full professor of constitutional law in a Catholic university in Rome, whose name is Università Europea di Roma. And I'm vice president of the Centro Studi Rosario Livatino. Mr. Airoma is another vice president. Centro Studi Rosario Livatino is a think tank that is made of lawyers, law professors, judges, public notaries. As you see, the think tank is dedicated to the memory of the Blessed Livatino. I would like to thank Mr. Simpson for this kind invitation and all of you for taking part to this meeting. I apologize for my spaghetti English. I was a bad student of the Christian Brothers of an Irish congregation founded by the Blessed Edmund Rice. Sorry, I wasn't so good at school as I should have been. So I was asked to take the floor to talk about the legal thinking of Rosario Livatino. The blessed judge didn't write much. As Airoma said, there are just 2 conferences, only available in Italian. The first is about the role of the judge in a changing society, 1984. And the second conference is about faith and law, 1986. I think it would be interesting and worth to translate these speeches in English or in French. So if anyone is interested, please let me know. The 2 conferences give us interesting suggestions about Livatino's thinking. I will make 3 points. First, the importance of natural law. Second, the task of Catholic jurists. Third, Livatino's vision of the role of the judge in the contemporary society. So, the first point is about the existence and the importance of natural law. Rosario Livatino is deeply convinced of the need to consider natural law. In a meeting referring to the question of euthanasia, Livatino observed, if the believer's opposition to this law is based on the conviction that human life is a divine gift that is not lawful for man to suffocate or interrupt, so is the opposition of the non-believer, who is based on the conviction that life is protected by natural law, that no positive law can violate or contradict, since it belongs to the sphere of unavailable goods that neither individuals nor the community can attack. The link between natural law and positive law here is very clear, even though the same Livatino admits that it is increasingly difficult in the modern Occidental and complex society to know and have accepted the concepts of right and wrong. Nonetheless, there is a bunch of principles that must be respected by every legislative power. It is interesting that the Catechism of the Catholic Church, in order to explain natural law, recalls Cicero, a jurist who lived before Christ. Cicero says, "For there is a true law, right reason. It is in conformity with nature. It is diffused among all men, and it is immutable and eternal. Its orders summon to duty. Its prohibitions turn away from offense. To replace it with a contrary law is a sacrilege. Failure to apply even one of its provisions is forbidden. No one can abrogate it entirely." Centuries later, St. Thomas noted that if the law is unjust, it is not a real law. This elementary truth, very clear in Livatino's thinking, is no more accepted in Europe. Benedict XVI highlighted this point in his speech in front of the German parliament. I quote this passage of the speech of the Pope. "The idea of natural law is today viewed as a specifically Catholic doctrine, not worth bringing into the discussion in a non-Catholic environment, so that one feels almost ashamed even to mention the term natural law. Consequently, there are concerted efforts to recognize only positivism as a common culture and a common basis for lawmaking, reducing all the other insights and values of our culture to the level of subculture, with the result that Europe, vis-à-vis other world cultures, is left in a state of culturelessness, and at the same time, extremist and radical movements emerge to fill the vacuum." This is the quotation from the Pope Benedict XVI in front of the German parliament. In this situation, it is more and more important to affirm, as Livatino did, the existence of natural law and to protest and challenge the laws that do not respect it. I quote Livatino's words, "Render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's," means that also Caesar has a natural law he has to respect. In other words, Livatino says, the state must respect those needs of individuals, of groups, of the community, that are indicated by their very human life. To make an example, Livatino says that the law cannot allow a person to kill another person, since the right to life that Livatino considers the most important one for the legal order is an inviolable right of the person, and so it is not available even from its holder. We may apply this principle to the questions of abortion and euthanasia, as Livatino did. So summing up this first point about Livatino's legal thinking, we could say, although Livatino is aware that natural law is not a popular subject, he thinks that there is a natural law and that positive law must respect it. The second issue that I would like to tackle is about the task and the behavior of Catholic jurists as we are. In other words, what does Livatino's life and message tell us about being jurist while being Catholic? Livatino quotes a speech of St. John Paul II of 1982 to the Italian Catholic Jurists Association. The great Pope spoke about the importance of implementing Christian ethics in legal science, in legislative, judicial, administrative activity, in all public life. We can see here a practical application of the first speech of the Polish Pope, in which he invited all the people, do not be afraid, and open wide the doors for Christ. To his saving power, open the boundaries of states, economic and political systems, the vast fields of culture, civilization, and development. In Livatino's life and thinking, we can see that, as Pope Benedict pointed out, the Christian message is not only informative, but performative. This means, as the Pope said, and as Livatino showed through his life and his message, that the gospel is not merely a communication of things that can be known. It is one that makes things happen, and it is life-changing. In many speeches has Pope Francis recalled this teaching. In one of his two conferences, Livatino states that there is not indifference between the political society and the faith. Livatino says, there is not absolute separation, but a correct relationship between faith and political society. In other words, religion is not only a private matter, but it has a concrete influence in public life. Livatino was beatified by the Catholic Church, as we heard from Mr. Airoma. He had a normal life. He didn't do any wonder during his life. When he was killed by the mafia, as Pope Francis noted, almost no one knew him, since he worked in a suburban court. He dealt with the seizure and confiscation of property of illegal origin acquired by the mafia. However, the Pope says, he did so in an unassailable manner, respecting the guarantees of the accused, with great professionalism and with concrete results. For this reason, the mafia decided to eliminate him. Operari sequitur esse, as Saint Thomas thought and as Livatino showed. In performing his daily duties, Livatino found the path to sanctity. He did his job without sensationalism, aware of the difficulties of the task to judge other men. As Mauro Ronco pointed out, Ronco is an emeritus professor of penal law in Italy and the president of our think tank. Livatino feels the great responsibility of his job, not only on the civil ground, but moreover on the moral one. And he finds it necessary for the believer to look at God and for the non-believer to look at the conscience inspired by the common good. Livatino said, as Airoma before me quoted, to decide is to choose, and to choose is one of the most difficult things that a man is called to do. And it is precisely in this choice to decide to order, that the believing magistrate can find a relationship with God. A relationship because doing justice is self-realization, it is prayer, it is self-dedication to God, an indirect relationship through love for the person judged. Livatino goes on. The non-believing magistrate replaces reference to the transcendent with reference to the social body in a different sense, but with equal spiritual commitment. And such a task will all be the lighter, the more the magistrate will humbly be aware of his own weakness. Livatino is very aware of Jesus' teaching and refers to it. Let the one among you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her. The blessed judge says about his job, sin is shadow, and you need light to judge, but no man is absolute light. So if we had to sum up the second point of Livatino's mandate, I would say that a Catholic jurist is a person who not only believes in Jesus, but tries to make his teaching performing his daily activities, and amongst them, his job. We come so at my third point. It concerns Livatino's teaching on the role of the judge in the contemporary society. At the time when Livatino lived, there was already a debate that goes on nowadays on the role of the judge and about how much he can bend the wording of the law in order to achieve a better decision. Being himself a judge, Livatino reflects about which type of attitude judges should have. In this conference, that is also related to money laundering, it is interesting to reflect on the picture of the judge Livatino draws. I quote a long passage of his conference. The judge's independence is not only his conscience. The judge's independence is not only in his conscience, in his moral freedom, in his loyalty to principle, in his capacity for sacrifice, in his technological knowledge, in his experience, in the clarity and linearity of his decisions, but also in his morality, in the transparency of his conduct even outside the walls of his office, in the normality of his relations and manifestations in social life, in the choice of his friendships, in his unwillingness to take up initiatives and business ventures, albeit permissible but risky, in his renunciation of any desire for appointments and easy profits, especially in sectors that, by their nature or the implication they entail, can produce the seed of contamination and the danger of interference. The judge's independence lies finally in his credibility, which he succeeds in gaining in the travails of his decisions and at every moment of his activity. We see here how high the standards are Livatino expects from judges. They go a lot further than what they are obliged to by law. In his eyes, judges should also be very cautious in their private lives in order to be truly independent and in order also to appear so. Of course, this is also influenced by the difficult situation of Sicily, where the mafia, for instance, tends to be present in area of economic lives of the island. Let me adapt the famous phrase, justice must not only be done, it must also be seen to be done. At the end of the day, one could pick out one word for this whole bunch of external and internal attitudes Livatino refers to: personal credibility of the judge. Livatino examines also the role of the judge in his relationship with the society from the point of view of the increasing pressure on him, taking place in Italy from the 60s onwards, to fix a new relationship between his role and the evolution of society, exalting the power of interpretation of the law and giving the judge a political role. Respecting Montesquieu's teaching, Livatino clearly states that the judge must observe his constitutional duty of loyalty to the law, since he is nothing more than an employee of the state, to whom is entrusted this very special task of applying the laws that society gives itself through its institution. Livatino refuses the idea that the judge can substitute himself to the legislative power, looking for the right solution of the case, to apply at the place of the one stated by the law. Livatino says, the judge must bend its own convictions to the law and not the law to its convictions. As Pope Francis pointed out, also in this regard, the relevance of Livatino is surprising because he grasps the signs of what would have emerged most clearly in the following decades, not only in Italy. That is, the justification of the encroachment of the judge in areas not proper to the role, especially in the areas of so-called new rights, with judgments that seem to be concerned with fulfilling every new desire and encumbered by any objective limit. We could summarize this third point of Livatino's legal thinking about the relationship between the judge and the society. On one hand, the judge is like Caesar's wife, who must be above suspicions. On the other hand, the judge must respect its function to apply the laws as approved by the people through its representatives, the parliament, and refuse a political role through judicial activism. So all the consideration I've done show the profound vitality of Livatino's legal thinking. His example constitutes a point of reference for all of us who are Catholic jurists. As the chief prosecutor of Rome, Dr. Lovoi, said, Livatino should be like Hippocrates for medical doctors, a point of reference for every magistrate, and I would add, as Airoma said, for all the jurists, but also for every man engaged in institutions, for every Christian, as Airoma said, who intends to serve this loyally without betraying his conscience. May blessed Livatino help us from heaven to make our contribution to society, committing ourselves as jurists to respect and promote natural law in the contemporary legal orders in which we work. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Filippo. And the floor now is for Claude.
Good evening. Good evening, everybody. So I haven't seen any notes from the audience, but I think that as the previous two interventions have been in English, and as if I heard correctly, you intend actually to also have Australian lawyers and Australian Lawyers as Catholic Association benefit from the recording of this session. I think it's probably better if I try to do my best in English. So first of all, I wanted to thank Conférence Saint-Yves for inviting me to this panel. It's really an honor because I was started as a lawyer here in Luxembourg in 2004, and at that moment in time internet was not yet so prevalent as it is today, and sometimes when you had to do research you turned to the feuille de liaison de la Conférence Saint-Yves, and I think this publication with its very graphic red orange bars at the top and at the bottom is something that is probably an image that Luxembourg lawyers of my generation have difficulties getting out of their heads. So it's really an honor, therefore, to be invited to a panel of this Conférence Saint-Yves. As William Simpson said before, my name is Claude Eischen. I'm a European Delegated Prosecutor working for the European Public Prosecutor's Office, which is a new EU institution. It was created recently, and it started its operation on 1st of June last year, and I joined this institution very soon after its creation in July last year. I've been asked to present a little bit the necessity of the fight against money laundering and also regarding people, as we have been discussing, one outstanding magistrate, one outstanding Catholic magistrate. This evening I have also been asked to search for other examples of inspiring lawyers in the combat against money laundering, and I can say from the outset that I have been successful on one front. Obviously, I can very well explain what money laundering is and why it needs to be fought against. On the second front, however, you will discover with me that, well, the things are not so easy, and that it is sometimes a bit harder to find inspirational figures in every domain. But first, maybe a few words for those among us who are not so familiar with money laundering. It's probably necessary to give a short definition, and I now hope that if I share my screen, this will work. Here we go. And I hope everybody can see now the presentation. And yes, so a very easy definition that is given is actually coming from a UN convention.
Claude, we cannot see your presentation.
You cannot see it?
No.
Okay.
Okay.
That is not good. Does it work? No?
No, it's still not.
Okay. Does it work now?
It's starting. Yeah, it works.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, so money laundering. Yes, let's do away with the definitions immediately. In medias res, it's basically the fact that you have dirty money which has been obtained from criminal activities, and the problem is that this money is dirty and you cannot do very much with it, as people will ask, well, where does the wealth come from if you become too conspicuous in your consumption, and therefore you need to launder the money. This is traditionally done via 3 steps. First, you try to integrate it, to placement into the financial system, which can be done in certain fashions. And then there's a second step, what is called layering. It's basically that you try to make things generally complicated. It's not more difficult a concept than that. You create sham companies who do business dealings that are hard to take apart. You transfer the monies between multiple jurisdictions. You create loans, and at the end of this layering, you are able then to present this money as having been obtained from lawful business. That is basically the idea behind it. It's the idea that you can use your dirty money openly. And what is often used in these categories is really anything that has a certain value. So you can use fake companies, you can use high value goods, you can pretend to buy cars. And what is often also used is simply traditional money transfer systems that exist in certain jurisdictions. So basically Havala and Feichen, which are very fancy names actually for something extremely old. It's a system based on compensation. It's nothing very different. Havala in itself, I know this word gets sometimes bandied about in the press, but as we have the chance of being in the presence of 2 Italian speakers, maybe a historical comparison is in order. It's nothing different from what merchants did in Lombardy 500 years ago. Basically, you give a promissory note to somebody that your friend in the other town will pay the bearer of the promissory note, and that's basically it. And so the roads by which you can launder money are multiple, and the problem is the extreme extent that this phenomenon has taken on at the time. It is estimated by the United Nations that between 800 and 2,000 billion dollars consist of dirty money. To give you an example, and again we are lucky to be in an Italian company today, $2,000 billion is the annual GDP of Italy. So the whole wealth created by all the Italians together in 1 year is probably equal, slightly superior to the upper end of the estimate of how much dirty money there is sloshing around in the world. So it is absolutely massive. And it is precisely this massive scale that not only starts, but that has already in the past and continues to cause problems, because there is a report from an international watchdog against money laundering called GAFI in French and the Financial Action Task Force in English. I'll have the quote from them in French, and I've translated into English on the fly. But GAFI says very clearly, s'il n'est pas maîtrisé ou traité efficacement, le blanchiment de capitaux peut avoir de graves coûts sociaux et politiques. la criminalité organisée peut en effet infiltrer les institutions financières, acquérir ou contrôler des pans entiers de l'économie par ses investissements, ou encore proposer des pots de vin à des agents publics, voire corrompre des gouvernements entiers. And yeah, it is essentially that they are saying that this amount of money is so massive that it allows organized crime to infiltrate financial institutions and to take control over entire sectors of the economy. And with so much money at your disposal, you are in a position to corrupt not only one or two civil servants, but you are in a position to be able to corrupt entire governments. And therefore, money laundering is a great societal risk. And it has been recognized as such for quite some time. Historically, the first attempts to rein in this phenomenon were made in the United States during the times of Prohibition. Then there was a second phase where it was recognized that the international drug trade was causing the same problems, but on a larger scale. And then you have the situation that evolved after 9/11, where the mirror image of money laundering, which is financing of terrorism, was also added to the catalog of things that need to be combated. I'll just stop sharing my screen for a moment because we're not really there yet. So this phenomenon needs to be combated. You need to fight money laundering if you want to have a more or less healthy society, because otherwise it just starts to rot everywhere. And the problem is that currently, with the fight against money laundering, you have to introduce more and more regulations, because once you outlaw a certain practice, which was obviously conducive to money laundering, well, of course, criminals are not stupid and they will find a way around it, which then makes it necessary that you need to legislate in order to also close that door. And so over the past 20 years, which is a bit the period I have been as a passive observer, looking at the legislative evolution, you note that the legislation becomes more dense, it becomes more burdensome also for the companies and for the economic actors. So there's a multiplication of rules, there's a multiplication of guidance relating to the rules, and this also creates, of course, cost for business. And I'm not now trying to sound like somebody who says we need to keep costs down for business. That's not at all my intention, but it is a factor we need to realize, and it is a fact that in certain cases you have, in particular, small businesses who have been doing their business lawfully, but who very clearly struggle to adapt to the situation in which we are now regarding money laundering. And so this concerns big firms. Here you have a slide that shows that a big Dutch bank, ABN AMRO, they actually made a movie because they were hiring what they call anti-money laundering heroes. Now, as much as I thought that they call them heroes, what they are actually really looking for is hundreds of let's say, low-level to mid-level new employees that they can use them to fill roles in their compliance department and in the the department that is tasked with creating the scorecards and seeing whether the client relationships are all correct. So that is how a big company would need to act in accordance with the law acts. And then you have the problem that smaller companies, well, they struggle. And so you had in Luxembourg the situation very recently that this is from April, so it's less than 1 month old. There has been a public declaration made by the Luxembourg tax authorities saying that there are 41 companies in the real estate sector are actually not compliant with their anti-money laundering obligations. And this comes, if you read the short extract from the articles I gave, this comes after they've been given 2 friendly reminders by the tax authorities, and after they've been given a 6-month grace period during which they were supposed to put their house in order. So for some of those, certainly some of those 41 companies are of bad faith, and they certainly need to be dealt with. But I'm speculating a little bit here. I can also imagine that among those, there's just some very small entities who are struggling to keep up with the paperwork that this creates, and that is a problem that we need to be aware of in the future. Because sanctions there are, and I have pulled in preparation of this session, I've pulled the latest statistics. So in Luxembourg from 2015 to 2019, there were a certain number of condemnations. So there were 339 prison terms that were handed down by judges, firm prison sentences, and then you have more than 500 prison sentences with probation that were handed down for crimes in relation with money laundering. And in what regards money laundering as a standalone offense, so not somebody who did a crime and then laundered the proceeds from his own crime, but money laundering really as a standalone offense, where you punish the person who is doing not more than just aiding the actual criminal to launder their money. The court fines that were handed down ranged from 1 year to 2 years. So the action of the public prosecution system and of the courts is serious, and these laws are enforced. And it is an ongoing struggle, also from a legislative point of view, to always keep up with the newest developments. Anti-money laundering, the fight against money laundering is unfortunately not as straightforward a matter as the fight against drunk driving, where you have very simple tools that you can use, where you have a very simple message to give to the population: don't drink and drive, and where everybody is very clear on what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do, namely don't drive when you're drunk. Whereas in money laundering, it is unfortunately not a straightforward matter. Now, for the second part, inspirational anti-money laundering lawyers, I must say, did a bit of research, and the results were a bit disappointing. And then I reflected a bit, and I thought to myself, well, that is also a bit it's the nature of the thing, really, because, well, most of the lawyers are, of course, on the side of the clients who maybe try to hide money, or if they have hidden money, try not to get caught. So I think you need to adopt a wider definition and see whether among prosecutors and magistrates you could name some who are really outstanding in their field. And if we define it in that way, I actually am quite in the lucky position that I don't have to look very far, because actually, if I may be allowed to say so, my top boss, so the European Chief Prosecutor, who is the boss of the European Public Prosecutor's Office, is Ms. Laura Codruzza-Kövesi, and she is the former Chief Prosecutor of the National Anti-Corruption Directorate in Romania, and she has in her time and during her time in Romania actually acted with a dedication that is relatively rare to find. So she proceeded during her time at the Romanian Anti-Corruption Directorate. She proceeded to the indictment of, and believe me, I have had these figures checked, so the figures that will come now are true and validated, even if some of us may have trouble believing them. But she has indicted, or her department indicted, 14 acting and former ministers, 39 deputies, 4 senators, 1 member of the European Parliament, 8 state secretaries, 237 mayors, and 31 presidents of a county council. And during that period, the DNA, so the National Anti-Corruption Directorate in Romania, ordered seizing measures for assets with a total value of 2 billion euros. So this is actually, I think, and it's maybe a coincidence, maybe not, an outstanding example of a person who went to great length to fight corruption and to also, as is witnessed, as is shown by the 2 billion euros seized, to combat the money laundering that goes with the corruption and to bring this money back into the state's coffers. I think that's a really great example and a great inspiration. And credit also where credit is due. When Ms. Codruzza-Kövesi was recently in Bologna, in Italy, she made it a point of personal importance to salute the memory of Mrs. Falcone and Borsellino, who I suppose everybody in this audience knows. And it was very important to her to give tribute to those magistrates who also performed great work and who also paid the ultimate price for their work. And so I think this sheds also an interesting light on the ethics of her and the office. And I think at the end of the day, it is an important symbol, and it was an important gesture. And then I come to cases where I looked at, and I thought at the end of the day it's not very clear. Many of us may probably know or have heard about Lava Jato, which was a big scandal in Brazil with lots of corruption, lots of money laundering, enormous amounts. So it became so famous and so widespread that books have been written about it. Netflix actually has a series about it. It's become nearly a worldwide phenomenon. But the problem is that if you dig a little bit deeper, as an outsider, as a person who is not acquainted with the realities of Brazil, I must say, for me, it was very hard to find a figure which I could have presented as an inspiring figure. There was an investigating judge who, upon first reading of the case, seems to have really made great advancements. And if it's true, I am certainly not want to be seen as diminishing his achievements in fighting money laundering and corruption. But if you continue then to read a little bit, there are also voices that say that his inquiries were maybe a little bit one-sided and maybe also a little bit politically oriented. As said, if there are any people in the audience who know Brazil better than I do, I'm very happy to discuss and very happy to learn new information, but I thought it prudent to maybe pass this example. And then, very interesting, you also have not only judges and magistrates and lawyers who work against corruption, but sometimes it's also the work of journalists and whistleblowers. There is one huge ongoing scandal, which is called the 1MDB scandal, where actually the former Prime Minister of Malaysia is accused of having embezzled for his own benefit enormous sums, again, hundreds and hundreds of millions of US dollars. And this case was brought to light actually by a whistleblower in a European bank, from a European bank, who gave the material to a journalist who I think was of British or American nationality, who was in the Malaysia-Indonesia region, and that relatively brave woman then published a series of articles which led to the unraveling of this scandal, which has had ramification in the Middle East, which has had ramifications in Europe, in America. It's also a very epic story, but the point I want to get across here is that at the beginning it was one whistleblower and one journalist who started, who got the ball rolling on this one. And maybe also there a word of caution regarding whistleblowers. It's always it's a delicate balancing act. Sometimes you cannot be very sure which motives are behind somebody who blows the whistle. Are there noble motives behind it? Is it on the other hand, maybe a way of personal enrichment? Is it, this has also already happened in the past, this form of blackmail gone wrong, where the other party then basically decides to get their revenge by spilling the beans. And it's when you get anonymous complaints, you always need to be very careful, because sometimes well, truth is sometimes hard to come by. And then finally, we've discussed about lawyers. The two speakers who went before me presented one outstanding example of a magistrate. I have given some other magistrates' names and personalities to consider. And then we have the very recent case where the anti-narcotics prosecutor from Paraguay was brutally killed while being on honeymoon on the beach in Colombia. This happened very recently. Press sources say that it was because of his investigations and that it was very clearly motivated by the local mafia he was fighting. So there also we have a magistrate judge who price and who made the ultimate sacrifice in carrying out his duties. He is also described as having been very fearless, and he seems to have gotten in the crosshairs of very powerful people who decided that he should be eliminated. And I think this kind of courage is something that is very rare to find. That's where I would like to end my presentation there. The only thing that maybe I want to add is that talked about magistrates, and also a bit one case where it was a whistleblower and the journalists. But actually, the fight against money laundering, the fight against corruption, if you consider that any ill-gotten gain is ipso facto also subject to money laundering, it is also the daily fight of every citizen. So next time, if anybody asks you, do you want a receipt with that? Well, maybe if you think of the implications, maybe you're tempted then to say, yes, please, I want a receipt with that. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Claude. And now the floor is for Olivier, who will provide concluding remarks. The floor is yours, Olivier.
Yes, thank you, William. Thank you for your presence, and thank you for all the presentation about the importance and the crucial impact of the fight against money laundering and financing terrorism. Rosario Livatino is a key person in this area and an example. Unfortunately, we can see that this fight against corruption is still crucial and raise the importance of the compliance officer, the magistrate, and the prosecutor lawyers' roles and engagements. Since 1990, the regulation never stopped growing in order to fight more properly and more efficiently against trafficking. The recent death of the special prosecutor in Paraguay last week, Marcelo Pecci, shows that the way is still open for a goodwill person. After this conference, can we conclude that as goodwill person following Saint-Yves and Blessed Rosario Livatino, the main question for us is, but what I have done to you? It's the last question of Rosario before his death. Thank you for your presence, and I wish you a pleasant evening. William, I let you the floor.
Thank you very much. So we are going to end the event now. So thank you very much for following, and many thanks for all our speakers. So have a good evening.